The rain came down in sheets the night Tucker Brennan stopped being someone's son. He was 17 years old, standing in the hallway of the only house he had ever called home. And the man who had married his mother 3 years ago was holding the front door open with one hand and a cold expression with the other. Dwight Doyle was a long-haul trucker by trade, a man whose shoulders had been built by decades of loading freight and whose patience had been worn down to nothing by the same. He did not yell. He did not curse. He simply pointed at the wet darkness beyond the porch and said 5 words that would echo in Tucker's head for the rest of his life. Get out. Don't come back. Tucker stood there for a moment, his backpack already slung over one shoulder, his sneakers untied, his hoodie pulled up around his ears. The accusation had come 20 minutes earlier. $200 missing from Dwight's wallet, a wallet that sat on the kitchen counter every night next to a half-empty bottle of bourbon. A wallet Tucker had not touched. Not once. Not ever. But the truth had not mattered. Dwight had decided. And Lynette Brennan Doyle, the woman who had given birth to Tucker 17 years ago in a hospital just outside Bakersfield, the woman who had once kissed his scraped knees and packed his lunches in brown paper bags, the woman who had stood at his father's empty grave 7 years ago and squeezed his small hand so tightly her knuckles had gone white. That woman now stood at the end of the hallway with her arms crossed and her eyes fixed on the wall behind her son. She did not speak. She did not move. She did not look at him. That was the part that broke something inside Tucker. Not the accusation. Not Dwight's cold voice. Not even the rain pounding against the porch roof like 1,000 fists demanding to be let in. It was his mother's silence. The way she had become over these last 3 years, a woman who could stand 5 feet away from her own child and pretend he was already gone. He took one step forward, then another. He waited at the threshold for her to say something. Anything. A protest. A goodbye. A flicker of the woman she used to be. Before bourbon and Dwight and whatever grief she had buried so deep it had calcified into stone, she said nothing. Tucker stepped out into the rain. The door closed behind him with a soft, final click that was somehow louder than any slam could have been. He stood on the porch for a long moment, water already soaking through his hoodie, dripping from his eyelashes, pooling in the worn canvas of his sneakers. He looked up at the sky and felt the cold cut through him like something personal. Then he started walking. He did not know where he was going. He had 12% battery on his phone and $10 folded into the inside pocket of his backpack and a head full of static. He walked past the houses of his childhood, the lawns where he had once played soccer with neighborhood kids, the driveways where he had learned to ride a bicycle. He walked past the elementary school where his father had picked him up every single afternoon until the year he turned 10. He walked past the diner where his father had taken him for pancakes every Saturday morning. The booth in the corner, the way Dale Brennan would lean across the table and ask Tucker about his week, as if every word out of his son's mouth was the most important thing in the world. Tucker walked past all of it, and the rain kept coming. He stopped at a payphone outside a closed laundromat and pulled his phone from his pocket. He scrolled through his contacts. 3 friends from school. He called the first. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. He called the second. The phone was off. He called the third. A father's voice answered, gruff and tired, said his son was asleep. Said it was nearly midnight. Said, "Call back tomorrow," and hung up. Tucker stood under the dripping awning of the laundromat and watched his battery drop to 9%. He laughed. It was not a happy sound. It was the sound a person makes when they finally understand in their bones that no one is coming, that the world has decided by some cold arithmetic that they do not matter. He kept walking. The streets thinned out as he moved toward the edge of town. The houses gave way to warehouses. The warehouses to empty lots. The empty lots to the long, flat stretch of highway that ran east toward the desert. He did not have a destination. He had only the rain and the steady drumming of his sneakers on wet pavement and the small, hot weight in his chest that he could not name. He thought about his father. Dale Brennan had died in August of 2019. A car accident on a stretch of highway outside Fresno, that was what they had told 10-year-old Tucker. A single vehicle crash. The car had gone off the road and into a ravine. The body had been burned beyond easy recognition. There had been a closed casket and a small service and a folded American flag that his mother had set on the mantel and never spoke about again. Tucker had not understood at 10 why his father's funeral had felt so strange. He had only understood that the man who had taught him how to read a compass and how to tie a fishing knot and how to look up at the night sky and find the North Star was suddenly impossibly gone. 7 years. That was how long Tucker had carried the absence. 7 years of birthdays without his father at the table. 7 years of school plays his father had not seen. 7 years of his mother slowly disappearing into a bottle and then into Dwight, and then into the silence she had handed him tonight, like a final gift. He reached into his backpack as he walked and pulled out the only two things in the world that still felt like they belonged to him. A photograph. A compass. The photograph was creased and faded at the edges, the colors washed out by time. It showed a man kneeling in the grass next to a small boy. The man was tall and broad-shouldered with sandy hair, cut military short and eyes the color of pale river water. The boy was Tucker, maybe 8 years old, holding up a fish nearly half his own size, his face split open by the kind of smile that did not exist in the world anymore. Behind them was a lake. Behind the lake was a sky so blue it almost looked painted. The compass was a Hamilton brass and steel military issue. Dale Brennan had carried it for years before he gave it to Tucker on the boy's 9th birthday. The needle still worked. The glass was scratched but unbroken. On the back, engraved in small block letters, were 3 words: North is home. Tucker held the compass in his palm and felt the cold metal warm slowly against his skin. He thought about what his father used to say to him, the words that had become a kind of prayer in the boy's memory. When you're lost, don't look at the map. Look up at the stars. Tucker looked up. There were no stars. Only the heavy black weight of rain clouds and the orange smear of streetlights. And the rain, always the rain. He put the compass back in his backpack. He kept walking. The gas station appeared at the very edge of town, where the streetlights gave up and the highway stretched on into darkness. It was an old place, the kind of station that had been built in the 1970s and never updated, with 2 pumps under a flickering canopy and a small convenience store behind street glass. The neon sign read, "Open" in red, but 2 of the letters were burned out. So it actually read, OEN, and Tucker stared at it for a long moment. As if those 2 letters were trying to tell him something, he turned into the lot. His sneakers squelched on the wet asphalt. He saw the cashier inside the store, an older man in a baseball cap, reading a paperback, not looking up. He saw the dumpsters at the back of the lot, dented and overflowing. And then, beyond the dumpsters parked in the far corner of the property where the lot met an empty field, he saw the RV. It was a recreational vehicle in only the loosest sense of the word. It might have been a Winnebago once, decades ago, when its paint had been white, and its tires had been round, and its windows had not been cracked. Now it was a ruin. Rust climbed up the sides like ivy. The front tire on the driver's side sagged at an angle that suggested it had not held air in a long time. A piece of weather stripping hung loose from the door, flapping slowly in the wind. The whole thing leaned slightly to the left, like a tired old man who had forgotten how to stand up straight. Taped to the windshield, written in black marker on a piece of cardboard, was a sign. For sale. $10, as is. Tucker stopped walking. He stood in the rain and stared at the cardboard sign, and a sound came out of his mouth that was almost a laugh. $10. He had $10 in his backpack. He had a folded $10 bill in the inside pocket, the last of the cash he had been saving for nothing in particular. Just the small comfort of knowing there was something between him and zero. And here in the rain at the edge of town, at the edge of his life, was a thing he could buy with it. He shook his head. He started to walk on, but he did not get far, maybe 3 steps. Then he stopped again and turned and looked back at the RV, and something in his chest did a small, strange thing that he could not explain. The RV looked the way he felt. Broken. Forgotten. Left at the edge of the world by people who had decided it was not worth the trouble of fixing. And in that moment, standing in the rain with $12 and a photograph and a compass and nowhere on earth to go, Tucker understood that the RV and he were the same. A voice came from behind him. "You looking to buy?" Tucker turned. The man was standing maybe 10 feet away near the back corner of the RV, as if he had been there the entire time, and Tucker simply had not seen him. He was older, somewhere around 60, with a weathered face that had seen too many seasons and gray hair pulled back under a wool cap. His jacket was old canvas stained with grease, and his hands were stuffed deep into the pockets. But his eyes, Tucker noticed, were sharp, not tired, not drunk. Sharp, watchful. The eyes of a man who had been waiting for something for a very long time. "I'm looking," Tucker said. His voice came out smaller than he wanted. The man nodded slowly. "She's $10. Does she run sometimes?" Tucker almost laughed again. "That's a pretty wide range." "It's an honest one." The two of them stood in the rain for a long moment. The cashier inside the store turned a page of his paperback. Somewhere far off, a truck horn sounded on the highway. The man in the wool cap did not move. He just watched Tucker with those sharp, patient eyes. And Tucker had the strangest feeling that the man was waiting for him to say a specific thing, though he could not imagine what it might be. "I've got $9, Tucker said, "and some change." He did not know why he said 9. He had 10. But he said 9 because the truth was that he wanted to see what this man would do. And he wanted to keep $1 for himself. One single dollar to stand between him and the absolute bottom of the world. The man tilted his head slightly. "Why do you want it, kid?" Tucker opened his mouth. He had a lie ready. He was going to say he was driving out to see family. He was going to say he needed transportation. He was going to say something that did not break him open in front of a stranger in the rain. What came out instead was the truth. "Because I don't have anywhere else to go," and the man was quiet for a long time. The rain kept falling. The neon sign behind them flickered OENOENOEN. And then the man asked a question that in the moment seemed entirely ordinary, but which Tucker would replay in his mind 100 times in the weeks to come. "What's your name, son?" "Tucker." "Tucker what?" "Brennan. Tucker Brennan." The man went very still. It was the smallest thing. A half-second pause, no more. His weight shifted by perhaps an inch. His jaw tightened, then relaxed. His eyes, those sharp eyes, did something that Tucker did not have a name for. A flicker. A recognition. The look of a man who had just heard a word he had been waiting years to hear, and who had decided in that half second not to let on. Then the man nodded. $9, he said. That's fine. My name's Earl. Earl Whitfield. He reached into the pocket of his canvas jacket and pulled out a small ring of keys. There were 2 keys on the ring brass, and old, the kind of keys that had not been cut in any hardware store in 30 years. He held them out in the rain. Tucker took the $9 from his backpack with shaking hands. He counted it. He counted it again. He handed it across. Earl's hand closed around the bills and the change, and his other hand placed the keys into Tucker's palm. The brass was cold. Tucker closed his fingers around it. "There's one thing you need to know," Earl said. Tucker looked up. Earl's expression had changed. The patient watchfulness was still there, but something else had come into it now. Something heavier. Something almost like grief. "There's a door inside that RV," Earl said. "At the back. A metal door. It's locked." Tucker's chest tightened. "Why?" "It's been locked a long time." "Locked how?" "Locked by someone who knew what they were doing." Tucker swallowed. The rain ran down his face. "What's behind it?" Earl was quiet for a long moment. He looked past Tucker off into the darkness beyond the gas station, as if he were seeing something the boy could not see. When he spoke again, his voice was lower. "Listen to me, Tucker Brennan. You don't have to open that door. You hear me? You can sleep in this RV tonight and tomorrow night, and 100 nights after that, and you can let that door stay closed. There's no shame in it. Some doors are locked for a reason." "What reason?" Earl looked at him, really looked at him, and Tucker saw something in the old man's face that he would not understand for a very long time. "Some doors," Earl said, "you only open when you're ready for the truth on the other side. And the truth, son, the truth doesn't always set you free. Sometimes it just breaks you in a new place." Tucker stood there, the keys cold in his fist, the rain cold on his face. "What if I open it?" Earl was quiet. Then he gave a small nod almost to himself, as if he had just confirmed something he had suspected all along. "Then you open it when you're ready, not before." He turned and started walking away, his old boots splashing in the puddles. He moved across the lot with the slow, deliberate gait of a man who had walked many miles in his life and was not in a hurry to walk many more. Tucker watched him go. "Wait," Tucker called out. "How did you know my name?" Earl did not stop. He did not turn around. He just lifted one hand a small wave and kept walking. Then he turned the corner around the convenience store, and he was gone. Tucker stood alone in the rain with 2 keys in his hand and a broken RV behind him and a question in his chest that had no answer. He turned toward the RV. The door creaked on its hinges as he pulled it open. The first thing that hit him was the smell. Dust, mostly. Old fabric. The faint metallic tang of rust. But underneath all of it, almost too faint to notice, was something else. Coffee. Faint, stale, but unmistakable. Someone had drunk coffee in this RV, and not too long ago. He climbed inside. He pulled the door shut behind him. The rain on the metal roof sounded different from in here, softer, almost gentle, like it had finally been forgiven for everything it had done to him outside. He stood in the small space and looked around. The interior was as worn as the outside. A small kitchenette to his left, the cabinets hanging at angles. A torn vinyl bench seat to his right, the foam exposed where the cover had split. A driver's seat up front with the springs poking through. Wires hung from the ceiling where a light fixture had once been. The floor creaked under his weight. Every surface was coated in a thin gray film of dust, but it was dry. And it was warm, or at least warmer than the rain outside. And it was, for the first time in his life, his. He dropped his backpack onto the bench seat. He sat down beside it. He let his head fall back against the wall and closed his eyes. And for a long moment, he just listened to the rain on the roof and tried to remember how to breathe. When he opened his eyes, he saw it. At the back of the RV, past the kitchenette, there was a narrow hallway he had not noticed before. It was maybe 3 feet long. The walls were paneled in cheap wood veneer, and at the end of it, set into the rear wall of the vehicle, was a door. It was not like the rest of the RV. It was metal. Solid steel by the look of it. Painted a dull gray with no handle, only a heavy keyhole set in the center. The frame was reinforced. Whoever had installed this door had not been thinking about a recreational vehicle. They had been thinking about a vault. Tucker stood up slowly. He walked toward the door. The hallway seemed to stretch longer than it should have, the air growing colder with each step. He stopped in front of it. He placed his palm flat against the steel. It was cold. Colder than the rain outside. Colder than anything in the RV had any business being. He looked closer. And there, in the lower right corner of the door, etched into the metal in small, careful letters, he saw something that stopped his heart. DB 2019. 2 letters. A year. That was all. Tucker's hand began to shake. D.B. Dale Brennan. 2019. The year his father had died. He stepped back from the door. He stepped back again and again, until his shoulders hit the opposite wall, and he could not retreat any further. His breathing came short and quick. His vision narrowed. The rain on the roof seemed to grow louder, then softer, then louder again. It was a coincidence. It had to be a coincidence. Dale Brennan was a common enough name. The letters could mean anything. They could be the initials of the man who had built the door. They could be a maker's mark. They could be nothing at all. But Earl had known his name. Earl had known his last name before Tucker said it. Earl had told him about the door before Tucker had even seen it. Tucker slid down the wall until he was sitting on the floor of the hallway, his back pressed against the panel, his eyes fixed on the steel door 3 feet away. He pulled his backpack into his lap. He reached inside with shaking fingers and took out the photograph of his father. He held it up in the dim light. The man kneeling in the grass, the pale river water eyes, the smile that had been gone from the world for 7 years. "Dad," Tucker whispered. The word felt strange in his mouth, like a language he had forgotten how to speak. "Dad, what is this?" The photograph did not answer. The rain kept falling. The door stayed closed. Tucker sat in the hallway for a long time. He did not sleep that night. Not really. He moved eventually back to the bench seat at the front of the RV, and he wrapped himself in his soaked hoodie, and he tried to close his eyes. But every time he did, he saw the door. He saw the 2 letters. He saw his father's face in the photograph. And then he saw Earl Whitfield's face in the rain, and then he saw his mother's silence in the hallway of the house that had stopped being his home. And the 3 images turned over and over in his mind until he could not tell which one was the worst. Around 3 in the morning, the rain stopped. The silence that followed was the loudest silence Tucker had ever heard. He lay on the bench seat with his eyes open, listening to the small sounds of the RV, settling the tick of cooling metal, the soft creak of old wood. He thought about getting up to look at the door again. He thought about trying to break it open. He thought about 100 different things, and he did none of them because he was too tired and too afraid and too young. And then, somewhere out in the dark beyond the gas station, he heard an engine. It was low and quiet, the sound of a large vehicle moving slowly on wet pavement. Tucker sat up. He crossed to the cracked window above the kitchenette and pulled the edge of the curtain back just a sliver, just enough to see. A black SUV was driving along the road that ran past the gas station. It was moving at a crawl well below the speed limit, its headlights off. It passed the entrance to the lot. It kept going. It disappeared around a bend in the road. Tucker waited. He counted to 30. He counted to 60. He counted to 120. The SUV came back. It drove past the gas station again this time, in the opposite direction. Still slow, still with its headlights off. It paused for a moment near the entrance to the lot. Then it moved on. Tucker let the curtain fall. He stepped back from the window. His heart was hammering so hard he could hear it in his ears. He did not know what he had just seen. He did not know who was driving the SUV or what they were looking for, or whether it had anything to do with him at all. But he knew in some deep animal place inside him that something had just changed. That the world he had walked into tonight was not the world he had walked through yesterday. That the door at the back of the RV with his father's initials on it was not a coincidence. And the man named Earl Whitfield was not a stranger. And the rain that had soaked him to the bone had not been a punishment, but a baptism into something he did not yet understand. He sat back down on the bench seat. He pulled the photograph of his father out of his backpack one more time. He looked at it in the dim light. "Dad," he whispered again. "I think you knew." He did not know what he meant. He did not know what his father had known. But he said it anyway because it felt true. Because in that moment, sitting in a stolen kind of shelter, at the edge of his life, with his father's initials carved into a locked steel door 3 feet away, Tucker Brennan understood for the first time that the story he had been told about his father's death was not the whole story. He understood that the man in the photograph had been keeping a secret, and the secret had not died with him. The sun came up gray and cold over Bakersfield. Tucker had not slept. He sat on the bench seat with the photograph in one hand and the compass in the other. And he watched the light slowly fill the RV through the cracked windows. Dust motes drifted in the pale beams. The smell of coffee, faint but persistent, seemed somehow stronger in the morning air. He stood up. His back ached. His legs felt stiff. He was hungry in a way he had not been hungry in a long time. The kind of hunger that goes past the stomach and settles into the bones. He went outside. The lot looked different in daylight. Less mysterious. Just an old gas station at the edge of a tired town, with 2 pumps and a small store, and a broken RV in the corner. The cashier had been replaced by a woman with bleached hair, who did not look up when Tucker walked past the window. The highway in the distance hummed with morning traffic. Life somewhere was going on. He walked for nearly 2 hours before he found work. The third place he tried was a small auto repair shop on Edison Highway. A 1-bay garage run by a heavy-set man in coveralls who looked Tucker up and down once and asked if he could sweep. Tucker said yes. The man pointed to the back lot where a decade's worth of junk had accumulated against the chain-link fence and said $20 if he cleaned it by noon. Tucker cleaned it. He swept until his arms ached. He hauled scrap metal and old tires and rotting cardboard until his hands were black with grease. He worked through the morning without stopping. And at 11:45, the heavy-set man came out of the garage with a $20 bill and a long look. "You hungry?" the man asked. Tucker nodded. The man went back inside the garage and came out a minute later with a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. He handed it to Tucker without a word. Then he went back inside. Tucker stood in the parking lot of the auto shop with $20 in his pocket and a sandwich in his hand. And for the first time since he had walked out of his mother's house, he felt something that was almost like hope. He walked to the corner store and bought bread and peanut butter and a gallon of water. He had $12 left. He walked back to the RV, slowly taking his time, letting the sun warm his face. When he opened the door of the RV and stepped inside, the smell of coffee hit him again. Stronger this time. Or maybe he was just imagining it. He set his groceries on the kitchenette counter and looked around at his strange new home. His eyes found the hallway, the door. He turned away. Not yet, he told himself. Not yet. He spent the afternoon cleaning. He did not have soap or rags, but he tore an old shirt into strips and used water from the gallon jug to wipe down the worst of the dust. He swept the floor with his hands. He opened the cabinets one by one to see what was inside. Most of them were empty. A few had old papers, the kind of receipts and instruction manuals that accumulate in any vehicle over the years. One had a dead spider. One had a single playing card. The 4 of clubs sitting face up like an offering. And then in the cabinet over the small sink behind a panel of warped plywood that had come loose at one corner, Tucker found something that did not belong. It was a metal box. He pulled it out slowly. It was the size of a shoebox made of dull gray steel with no markings on the outside. It was heavy. He set it on the kitchenette counter and stared at it for a long moment. He tried the latch. It was not locked, only stuck with age. He pried it open with the edge of a butter knife he found in a drawer. The hinges groaned. The lid lifted. Inside, lying on a folded piece of canvas, were 2 things. The first was a watch. A Hamilton watch, brass and steel, with a leather strap cracked from years of wear. Tucker did not need to look at it twice. He had seen it on his father's wrist 1,000 times. The same watch his father had worn to work every morning. The same watch his father had been wearing supposedly on the day his car had gone off the road into a ravine outside Fresno in August of 2019. The same watch his mother had told him when he asked had been destroyed in the fire. The second thing in the box was a stack of papers tied with a faded length of string. Tucker's hands were shaking again. He set the watch down on the counter very gently as if it might break. He picked up the papers. He untied the string. He began to flip through them. Most of the pages were unfamiliar. Engineering diagrams, columns of numbers, what looked like internal company memos with names blacked out. But on the 3rd page near the top, he saw a header that froze him in place. Meridian Defense Systems. Internal Technical Review. Lead Engineer, D. Brennan. He flipped to the next page. And the next. And the next. The name appeared again and again. Dale Brennan, Lead Engineer. Senior Project Manager. Authorized Signatory. The dates ranged from 2014 through the summer of 2019. The most recent document was dated 3 weeks before his father had died. Tucker sat down on the floor of the RV. He put the papers in his lap. He stared at them for a long time. His mother had told him that his father worked as a mechanic, that he fixed engines for a small shop in town, that he had been a quiet man with a quiet job and a quiet life. That had been the story for as long as Tucker could remember. That had been the story she still told when she told any stories at all, on the rare nights when she was sober enough to talk about the man she had once loved. But the man in these papers was not a mechanic. The man in these papers was a senior defense engineer at one of the largest military contractors in the western United States. The man in these papers had been involved in projects worth billions of dollars. The man in these papers had signed his name to documents that bore the seal of the Department of Defense. The man in these papers was a stranger. Tucker flipped to the last page. There, scrawled in the margin in his father's familiar handwriting, The same handwriting that had once signed his birthday cards and his school permission slips was an address. 2847 Lassen Boulevard, Sacramento, California. It had been circled. Once, twice, 3 times. Underneath the address in the same hand were 2 words. They know. Tucker stared at the address. He stared at the 2 words. He stared at the watch on the counter and the door at the back of the RV and the photograph of his father that was now lying on the bench seat where he had left it the night before. He understood in that moment that nothing in his life had been what he thought it was. His father had not died in a car accident. His father had not been a mechanic. His father had been someone else entirely, and that someone else had been keeping a secret so large that it had been worth dying for, or worth pretending to die for. And Tucker Brennan, 17 years old, $10 to his name, was now sitting in the middle of that secret, with his hands in his lap and his heart in his throat. His phone rang. He almost did not hear it at first. The sound was so foreign in the quiet of the RV. He fumbled for it in his pocket. The screen showed an unknown number. He hesitated for one long second. Then he answered. "Hello." The voice on the other end was old. A man's voice, gravelly, slow. "Tucker." Tucker's mouth went dry. "Who is this? Listen to me very carefully. Don't trust your mother. Don't trust the people who say they're trying to help you. The only thing you can trust right now is the watch." "What?" "The watch, Tucker. Trust the watch. And one more thing." "What?" The voice on the other end paused. When it spoke again, it was softer, almost gentle. "Your father loved you more than anything in this world. Remember that. Whatever happens next, you remember that." The line went dead. Tucker sat on the floor of the RV with the phone in his hand and the papers in his lap and the watch on the counter above him. The rain had been gone for hours, but he could still hear it falling somewhere in his memory, in the cold corner of his mind that had not yet caught up to what was happening. He looked at the steel door at the end of the hallway. He looked at the address, circled 3 times in his father's handwriting. He looked at the watch his mother had told him was destroyed, and he understood that whatever was about to happen next, he could not go back. He could not return to the house where Dwight Doyle had pointed at the door, or to the silence of his mother, or to the small, safe lie of the life he had been living. That life was over. It had ended the moment he had stepped onto the porch in the rain. A new life was beginning. He did not know yet what it would cost him. He did not know yet what it would give him. He knew only that the road ahead led to an address in Sacramento, and to a door he was not yet ready to open, and to a truth that had been waiting 7 years for him to be old enough to carry it. He stood up. He folded the papers carefully and put them back in the metal box. He picked up his father's watch and turned it over in his palm. The leather strap was warm now from being in his hand. The brass caught the late afternoon light coming through the cracked window. He fastened it around his wrist. It was too big. He tightened the strap as far as it would go, but it still hung loose on his thin arm. He did not care. He left it where it was. Then he walked to the back of the RV. He stood in front of the steel door. He placed his palm against the cold metal one more time. He looked at the 2 letters etched in the lower right corner. DB 2019. "Whatever you were hiding," he said quietly to the door, "I'm coming for it, but not yet." He turned and walked back to the front of the RV. He sat down on the bench seat. He pulled the photograph of his father into his lap. He looked at the man kneeling in the grass. The pale eyes, the smile that did not exist anymore in any world Tucker could find. Outside, the sun was beginning to set. The light coming through the windows turned gold, then orange, then the deep red of a sky that has been emptied of clouds. Somewhere beyond the gas station, a truck horn sounded on the highway. Somewhere beyond that, in a city 300 miles to the north, an address sat on a quiet street waiting. Tucker Brennan closed his eyes. In the morning, he would drive. The RV started on the third try. Tucker had spent 20 minutes the night before reading the faded owner's manual he had found, wedged behind the driver's seat, learning what the various knobs did, and praying that the engine would even turn over. When the starter finally caught and the old motor coughed to life with a sound like an animal clearing its throat, he sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, both hands gripping the steering wheel, and he listened to the rough idle as if it were a voice telling him something important. It was. The engine was telling him that he could go now, that the road was open, that whatever waited for him at the address in Sacramento was 300 miles away, and the only way to find it was to drive. He put the RV in gear. It moved. Just barely at first, the old vehicle rocking on its sagging tires as he eased it out of the lot. The transmission whined. Something underneath rattled in a way that suggested a part had not been properly attached for several years. But it moved. Tucker turned onto the highway, and Bakersfield slipped behind him in the gray morning light, and the only home he had ever known fell away in his rearview mirror like a photograph being slowly dropped into water. He drove north on Highway 99. The road unrolled in front of him through the long, flat agricultural valley of Central California, past almond orchards and dairy farms, and the occasional rusted billboard advertising businesses that no longer existed. The RV could not go faster than 55 without shuddering violently, so Tucker stayed in the right lane and let the semis pass him one after another, each truck pushing a wave of wind that made the RV lean and groan. He had his father's watch on his left wrist. He had the photograph of his father tucked into the visor above the windshield where he could glance up at it whenever he needed to remember why he was doing this. He had the metal box on the passenger seat beside him. The papers inside the address circled 3 times in his father's hand. He drove for 2 hours before he let himself think, or when the thoughts came, they came in pieces, disconnected, out of order. The way memories return after a long absence, blurred at the edges, missing pieces in the middle. He thought about his 9th birthday. It had been a small thing. His mother had baked a cake the night before, chocolate with white frosting, and his father had come home from work at 6 in the evening carrying a small wrapped package that he had set on the kitchen table without a word. Tucker, 9 years old, hair still damp from a bath, had torn the paper away and found the compass inside. The brass Hamilton with the engraving on the back. North is home. His father had knelt down in front of him in the kitchen. Tucker still remembered the way Dale Brennan had smelled that night. The way he always smelled when he came home from work of motor oil and coffee. And something else, something sharper, something that Tucker had assumed for years was just the smell of a man who fixed engines for a living, now behind the wheel of the broken RV with the papers on the passenger seat that said his father had not fixed engines at all. Tucker wondered for the first time what that other smell had been. What chemicals? What workshops? What rooms his father had stood in that he had never spoken of at home? "This was my father's," Dale had said that night, kneeling in the kitchen with the compass between them. "And his father's before him. Now it's yours." Tucker, 9 years old, had turned the compass over in his small hands and read the engraving aloud. North is home. What does that mean? His father had smiled. It was a quiet smile, the kind of smile a man smiles when he is thinking about something larger than the moment. It means when you're lost, Dale had said you don't need a map. You need to know which way is home. And as long as you can find north, you can find your way. But what if I don't have a compass? Then you look up. Up. At the star's sun. The North Star never moves. The whole sky turns around it. You find that one star and you'll always know which way is home. Tucker had nodded solemnly the way 9-year-old boys nod when they think they understand something they do not. His father had ruffled his hair. His mother had carried the cake in from the kitchen with candles burning, and the three of them had sung the birthday song. And for one bright moment in the long memory of that small house, the world had been whole. 11 months later, his father had been dead. Tucker drove. The valley stretched on. The sun climbed higher and burned the morning gray off the fields, and by the time he passed Modesto in the early afternoon, the cab of the RV was hot, and the engine was running rougher than it had at the start. He pulled off at a rest stop and let the motor cool. He ate 2 slices of bread with peanut butter from his small supply. He drank from the gallon jug. He looked at the address one more time just to be sure. 2847 Lassen Boulevard, Sacramento. He started the RV again. He drove on. He reached the outskirts of Sacramento just after 4 in the afternoon. The city looked different from Bakersfield. Cleaner. Newer. The buildings rose up taller along the freeway and the cars on the road were nicer. And Tucker had the strange sensation as he merged off the interstate and into the surface streets that he had crossed a border into a country where he did not speak the language. His father had worked here. The thought kept circling. His father had driven these streets. His father had stopped at these gas stations and these traffic lights maybe 1,000 times, while Tucker had been sitting in a kitchen in Bakersfield believing his father was at a small auto shop 15 minutes from home. The address took him into an industrial corridor on the north side of the city. The buildings here were big, set back from the road behind landscape berms and security fencing. Corporate signs marked the entrances. A pharmaceutical company, an aerospace firm, a logistics center. And then at the address he had been looking for, he saw it. Meridian Defense Systems. The sign was understated. Black letters on a brushed steel background mounted on a stone monument at the entrance of a long curving driveway. Beyond the sign, the driveway ran up a small rise and then down to a campus of 3 buildings, all glass and concrete. The kind of architecture that announces money without announcing what the money is for. A guard booth stood at the entrance. The fence was tall and topped with cameras that turned slowly in the afternoon light. Tucker drove past it. He did not slow down. He drove for another half mile, found a strip mall with a half-empty parking lot, and pulled the RV in next to a dumpster where it would not stand out. He killed the engine. He sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, his hands still on the wheel, his heart hammering against his ribs. His father had worked there. He got out of the RV. He locked the door. He walked back along the road in the direction of the Meridian campus, keeping to the far side of the street, his hood up against the cool afternoon wind. He found a coffee shop on the corner across from the main entrance, a small independent place with mismatched chairs and a hand-painted sign in the window. He went inside. He bought a cup of black coffee with 2 of his remaining dollars. He took the smallest table by the front window, the one with a clear view of the Meridian gate, and he sat down to watch. For 2 hours he watched. He watched the cars enter and exit through the gate. He watched the guards scan badges and wave vehicles through. He watched delivery trucks roll up to a side entrance where another guard checked manifests against a tablet computer. He watched the rhythm of the place, the way employees seemed to leave at fixed intervals, the way the security cameras swept in slow, predictable arcs. And then at 6 minutes past 6 in the evening, a black town car pulled up to the front of the main building. A man came out of this building. He was tall, somewhere in his mid-50s, with silver hair cut close to his skull, and a dark suit that fit him the way expensive suits fit men who own more than one. He moved with the easy confidence of someone who had never once in his life been told to wait. The driver of the town car opened the rear door for him. The man paused at the door, glanced briefly across the road, almost in Tucker's direction, and then climbed into the car. The door closed. The car drove away. Tucker did not move. His coffee had gone cold in front of him. His hands were trembling. He reached into the pocket of his hoodie and pulled out the old photograph of his father, the same photograph he had been carrying everywhere since the night his stepfather had put him out. He flipped the photograph over. He had not looked at the back in years. There were 2 faded ink marks, small notations in his father's handwriting. A date, 2017, and a name, S. Vance. Tucker turned the photograph back over. He stared at the man in the picture, the man kneeling next to his father, the man with his arm around Dale Brennan's shoulders. The 2 of them smiling at whoever had taken the photo. Younger then, thicker hair, but the face was unmistakable. It was the same face that had just stepped into the town car across the road. Sterling Vance. Tucker did not know who Sterling Vance was exactly. He did not yet know that the name appeared on the front page of business journals every quarter that the man had built Meridian from a small contractor into one of the largest defense suppliers on the West Coast, that the federal government had paid him more money in the last decade than most American towns would ever see. He knew only that Sterling Vance had once stood close enough to Dale Brennan to put an arm around his shoulders for a photograph, and now Dale Brennan was dead, or supposed to be. A chair scraped on the floor across from him. Tucker looked up. An older man had sat down at his table. He had not seen the man come in. The man was somewhere in his mid-60s with the kind of build that suggested he had once been larger and had grown thinner with age. He wore a wool blazer over a flannel shirt, jeans, and work boots. His face was lined. His hair was the color of iron. His hands folded on the table in front of him were the hands of a man who had once built things for a living. "You're Dale's boy," the man said. It was not a question. Tucker's mouth went dry. He set the photograph down on the table and turned it face up, but he did not speak. He could not. The man nodded slowly. "You've got his eyes. I should have known the moment I saw you sit down. I've been watching you for an hour, son. I had to be sure." "Who are you?" "My name is Bo Hargrove. I worked with your father at Meridian, from the year he started until the year he died." Tucker stared at him. His pulse was so loud in his ears that he could barely hear his own thoughts. "I'm the one who called you," Bo said. "Yesterday, at your RV, I told you to trust the watch." Tucker's hand went automatically to his left wrist to the Hamilton, the brass and leather. He felt the watch under his sleeve like a small warm thing pressed against his pulse. "How did you know I was here?" "Because your father told me a long time ago that one day you would come. He said when the time was right, when you were old enough, you would find your way to this address. He gave me a phone number to call when you did. Your number. He had it written on a piece of paper in an envelope in my desk drawer for the last 6 years. I never thought I would actually use it. Yesterday I used it." Tucker did not know what to say. The words refused to come together. He looked down at the photograph on the table, at his father's smile, at Sterling Vance's arm around his father's shoulders. "Why are you here?" he managed finally. Bo looked at him for a long moment. There was something behind the old man's eyes that Tucker recognized but could not name, something that he had seen in mirrors when he was younger. Something that men carry when they have been carrying too much for too long. "I am here," Bo said, "because your father trusted me with something, and I have been waiting 7 years to give it to you." He looked over his shoulder at the door of the coffee shop. The afternoon light was beginning to fade outside. The barista behind the counter was wiping down the espresso machine and paying no attention to them. Bo turned back to Tucker and lowered his voice. "Not here. Come with me." He stood up. Tucker hesitated. He thought of every story he had ever been told about strangers. He thought about the SUV from the night before sliding past the gas station with its headlights off. He thought about the man named Earl, who had known his name before he had given it. He thought about all the ways this could go wrong. Then he thought about his father. He stood up. He took the photograph from the table and slid it back into his pocket. He followed Bo Hargrove out of the coffee shop and into the deepening evening. The walk took only 10 minutes. Bo led him 3 blocks east and 1 block north into a quiet street of low warehouses and storage facilities. They stopped at a metal door set into the side of a 1-story building that looked from the outside like nothing at all. Bo produced a key. He unlocked the door. He waved Tucker inside. The space beyond was a workshop, a long room with a concrete floor and a low ceiling lit by hanging fluorescent tubes. A workbench ran along one wall, cluttered with electronics tools, half disassembled equipment. The opposite wall was covered floor to ceiling with paper. Schematics, photographs, newspaper clippings, hand-drawn diagrams pinned in long overlapping rows, like the work of a man who had spent years trying to solve a single terrible puzzle. Bo closed the door behind them. He locked it. "Sit down," he said. Tucker sat on a wooden stool in the middle of the room. Bo stood with his back to him for a moment, looking at the wall of paper. He took a long breath. When he turned, his face was set, and the lines around his mouth seemed deeper than they had in the coffee shop. "What I'm about to tell you," he said, "I have told no one. Not my wife before she passed. Not my brother. Not the federal agents who came to my house 6 years ago asking questions about your father. The reason I have told no one is that the people who killed your father are still alive, and they are still in power. And they would kill me too if they knew what I know. Do you understand what I'm saying to you?" Tucker nodded slowly. "Then listen carefully, son. Your father was not a mechanic. You already know that, or you would not be here. Your father was the lead systems engineer on the most lucrative contract Meridian Defense Systems has ever held. A contract worth $3.2 billion over 5 years from 2015 through 2019. The contract was to design and manufacture ceramic body armor plates for the United States military, for the men and women fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan. The contract was your father's pride. He worked 60 hours a week on it. He believed with everything he had that the work he was doing was going to save American lives." Bo paused. He swallowed hard. His eyes moved past Tucker to some place on the wall behind him. "In the spring of 2019, your father discovered that the body armor was defective." Tucker felt the cold rise up through the soles of his shoes. The ceramic plates that Meridian was shipping to the military were failing quality control tests in the field. The Department of Defense had received reports from forward operating bases that soldiers wearing the armor were taking rounds that should have been stopped. The plates were cracking. Some of them were shattering on impact. Sterling Vance, the man you just watched leave that building, was personally aware of the problem. The records showed that he had been aware of it for at least 18 months. And he had ordered his engineers to falsify the test data so that the plates could continue to be shipped. Bo's voice was steady, but Tucker could hear what it cost him to keep it that way. "More than 200 American soldiers died wearing those plates, Tucker. 207 by your father's count by the time he put the file together. Young men, young women, kids who trusted that the gear on their bodies would do what the government promised it would do. They were wrong." Tucker stared at him. He could not move. He could not speak. He could only sit on the wooden stool with the workshop air pressing against his skin and the words sinking into him one by one like stones dropped into still water. Your father, Bo continued, spent the last 3 months of his life building a case. He copied documents. He took photographs of internal test results. He recorded conversations with executives. He was going to take it all to the Inspector General at the Department of Defense. He was going to walk into a federal building and put a folder on a desk and end the whole thing. He told me what he was going to do. He told me on a Tuesday afternoon in the parking lot of a barbecue restaurant outside of town. The following Friday, his car went off the road outside Fresno and burned. Tucker found his voice. It came out cracked. My mother said he died in a single vehicle accident. That is what the police report said. But it wasn't. Bo looked at him for a long moment. There was no skid mark on the road, Tucker. None. A man losing control of his car at 60 miles an hour leaves a skid mark. Your father did not. His car went off the road as if he had aimed it. And the fire that destroyed the body, the fire that made identification impossible, the fire was a great deal hotter than a gasoline fire should be. There was thermite in that fire, Tucker, or something like it. Someone made sure that whatever was left of your father could never be properly examined. Tucker did not say anything. They killed him, Bo said quietly. Sterling Vance and the people working for him. They killed him to keep the contract alive, and they have been making money off of that contract for 7 years since. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Somewhere on the workbench, a small electronic device ticked softly. Tucker stared at his own hands, which had begun to shake again, and he felt the long, slow weight of the truth settle on his shoulders. Why didn't you say anything? He asked. The words came out small. If you knew. Why didn't you tell anyone? Bo looked at the floor. Because I was afraid, son. Because they killed your father, and I knew they would kill me. And I did not have the courage your father had. I told myself that without his evidence, I had nothing. That I was alone. That if I went to the authorities, I would just be another paranoid old man, making accusations against a billion-dollar company, and they would bury me the way they buried him. I told myself a lot of things over the years to make peace with my cowardice. None of them were true. The truth is, I was afraid, and I am still afraid. But I am old now, and I am tired of being afraid. And when your father told me one day his son would come, I made him a promise. I'm keeping it now. Bo walked to the workbench. He opened a drawer. He took out a manila folder thick with papers. He brought it back to Tucker. This is a copy of what your father gave me. It is not the original. The original was in his hands the day he died, and we never recovered it. But this copy is enough to start an investigation. It is enough to make some prosecutors very interested. It is not enough to win Tucker. To win, we need what your father had. The original documents, the signed memos, and one more thing. What? Bo looked at him steadily. A defective plate. An actual ceramic plate from the production line with the lot number and the manufacture date intact. Without that physical evidence, Sterling Vance can claim the documents are forgeries. He can claim your father was a disgruntled employee. He can drag it through court for years and bury it under appeals. We need the plate, Tucker. Your father had one. He took it from the production line 2 weeks before he died. He told me he had hidden it somewhere safe. He never told me where. Tucker's mind moved very slowly. The door. The steel door at the back of the RV. The cold metal. The 2 letters etched in the corner. The faint smell of coffee he had been imagining for 2 days now that he had told himself was nothing. His father had hidden the evidence in the RV. Of course he had. The RV had been his father's. The lock had been his father's. The whole thing had been a vault. waiting at the edge of a gas station in Bakersfield, waiting for the right person to come and find it. But how had it ended up at the gas station? Who had put it there? Who had taped the cardboard sign to the windshield? Who had set the price at $10, who had stood in the rain last night and called Tucker by his last name before Tucker had given it? Bo. Tucker said, "There's a man. I bought my RV from a man named Earl Whitfield. He knew my name. He told me there was a locked door inside." Bo went very still. What did he look like? Maybe 60. Gray hair, wool cap. He was at the gas station last night in Bakersfield. "You don't have a phone number for him?" "No. He just gave me the keys and walked away." Bo was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know that name," he said finally. "But your father had friends in places I never met. People he worked with before Meridian in jobs he never talked about. If a man named Earl Whitfield is the reason you found that RV, then your father set it up before he died. He knew this day was coming. He prepared for it." Bo's voice softened. "Your father loved you very much, Tucker. Whatever happens next, you remember that. Whatever you find behind that door, you remember that." It was the second time in 2 days that Tucker had been told to remember his father's love. The first had been the voice on the phone. The voice he now knew belonged to the man sitting in front of him. Outside the workshop, a car door slammed. Bo froze. Tucker froze. Bo moved fast for an old man. He crossed the workshop in 3 strides and killed the lights. The room dropped into a thick darkness, broken only by the orange glow of a small street lamp, filtering through the high window above the workbench. Bo pulled Tucker by the sleeve to the back of the room. He pressed his finger to his lips. For a long, long moment, the two of them stood in the dark and listened. Footsteps. 2 pairs. Moving slowly past the metal door. Pausing. Moving on. Then a voice, low and male, muffled by the steel. "This block. Hargrove, last known address." Another voice, lower, harder to make out. "Move." The footsteps faded. Bo did not move for almost a full minute. Then he turned to Tucker, and his face in the orange light was older than it had been 10 minutes ago. "Go," he said quietly. "Now, take the folder. Go back to that RV and you open that door, and you find whatever your father left for you. Do not stop at any rest stop. Do not stop at any motel. Do not stop until you are inside that RV with the doors locked. Do you understand? What about you? I've been waiting for them to come for 7 years. They are not going to be surprised to find me. You, on the other hand, they do not know about you yet. That is the only thing we have. Go." He pressed the folder into Tucker's hands. "Bo, go." Tucker went. He slipped out the back door of the workshop into an alley between 2 warehouses. He moved quickly, the folder pressed against his chest, his heart hammering. He took the long way around 3 extra blocks before he made his way back to the strip mall, where he had parked the RV. He did not see the SUV. He did not see anyone. He climbed into the driver's seat. He locked the doors. He started the engine on the second try. He drove for 6 hours straight. He did not stop. He did not eat. He did not allow himself to think about anything except the road ahead, and the gauges on the dashboard, and the dark mirror of the windshield that showed him nothing but his own pale face and the long stretch of highway behind him. He drove south through the night, back the way he had come, past Modesto, past Merced, past the long, quiet stretch where the lights of the cities thinned out and the fields rolled black and empty under the stars. He thought somewhere around midnight that he saw a pair of headlights behind him that did not pass when other cars passed. They stayed 300 yards back. They followed him for nearly 40 miles. Then somewhere past Madera, they took an exit and were gone. He did not know if they had been following him. He did not know if anything that was happening was real. He drove on. He reached Bakersfield just before 3 in the morning. The gas station looked different in the deep middle of the night. The neon sign flickered OEN, OEN. The pumps were dark. The convenience store was closed, a metal grate pulled down over the windows. The lot was empty except for the RV in the corner where he had left it the night before. Tucker parked at the far end of the lot. He sat in the driver's seat with the engine off for a long moment, his hands gripping the wheel, his mind moving in slow circles. He needed to ask the cashier about Earl Whitfield. He needed to confirm what he already suspected. He climbed out. He walked to the locked convenience store and read the hours posted on the door. 6 in the morning, 3 hours away. He went back to the RV. He climbed inside. He locked the door behind him. He fell asleep on the bench seat with the folder in his arms and Bo Hargrove's voice in his ears and his father's watch ticking softly against his pulse. He dreamed of his father. He dreamed of the kitchen on his 9th birthday, the smell of chocolate cake, the brass compass in his hand. He dreamed of his father kneeling in front of him with that quiet smile. And in the dream, his father turned to him and said something. Tucker did not remember being said. In the actual moment, a phrase that came out of the dream like a message left for him on a night he had not yet lived. When the time comes, son, don't be afraid to open the door. Tucker woke at 6:15 to gray light coming through the cracked windows. He sat up. The folder was still in his arms. His back ached. He drank water from the gallon jug. He pulled on his hoodie and stepped out into the morning. The convenience store was open. The same woman with bleached hair from the day before was behind the counter drinking coffee from a paper cup. Tucker walked in and waited for her to look up. "Help you? I bought an RV from a man here 2 nights ago. His name was Earl Whitfield. Older guy, gray hair, wool cap. Do you know him?" She frowned. "Earl who?" "Whitfield. Earl Whitfield. No one named Earl works here. Never has not in the 3 years I've been on. Are you sure you got the place right? He sold me the RV out back, the one parked by the dumpsters." The woman's frown deepened. She stepped out from behind the counter and walked to the window. She looked at the RV. She looked at it for a long time. "Hon," she said slowly, "that RV has been sitting there since I started working here. 3 years. The owner of the station told me it belonged to a regular customer who got into some trouble and never came back. He said, 'Leave it alone, the family will come for it someday.' No one has ever come for it. No one. I never saw anyone touch that RV until yesterday morning when I came in and noticed someone had taped a sign to the windshield. $10. I figured maybe the owner finally called and told him to sell it." "Who took the call, the owner?" "Reggie. He owns the station. He's not here." "Can I call him? I can give you the number." She looked at him with something between curiosity and concern. "Son, are you all right? Can I have the number?" She wrote it on a scrap of paper. Tucker took it. He thanked her. He walked back outside. He stood by the dumpsters and called the number on the back of an old receipt from his pocket. A man answered after 4 rings. Tucker explained who he was. He asked about the RV. He asked about Earl Whitfield. The man on the other end was quiet for a long moment. "Son, I don't know any Earl Whitfield. The RV out back belonged to a man named Dale Brennan. He paid me $300 in cash in the summer of 2019 to let him park it on that lot indefinitely. He said his family might come for it someday. I never saw him again. I figured he died." "Are you saying someone sold you that RV?" Tucker felt the ground shift under his feet. You're sure no one was here working with the RV? I'm sure. The lot has cameras. I can pull the footage if you want, but I'd have to come down there. I am 2 hours away. Tucker thanked him. He hung up the phone. He stood in the cool morning air with the receipt in his hand and the watch on his wrist, and the impossible weight of what he had just heard pressing down on him from every side. Earl Whitfield did not exist. There was no record of him at the gas station. He was not an employee. He had not been seen by the woman behind the counter. The RV had been sitting untouched for 3 years until 2 days ago, when someone had quietly taped a sign to the windshield and waited for a 17-year-old boy with $9 and nowhere to go to walk into a gas station lot in the rain. His father had set it up, or someone working for his father, someone who had known 7 years ago that this day was coming, someone who had positioned the RV, planted the documents, prepared the address, and waited. Tucker walked back to the RV. He climbed inside. He locked the door behind him. He stood in the small space and looked down the narrow hallway at the steel door at the back. The 2 letters etched in the lower right corner. DB 2019. His father had built this. His father had hidden the evidence here. His father had known that someday his son would come. Tucker did not wait any longer. He walked into the kitchenette. He opened the cabinet under the sink. He found jammed in the back, where he had not looked before, a heavy iron crowbar. Someone had left it there. Of course, someone had left it there. Everything in this RV had been left for him. He took the crowbar. He walked down the hallway. He stood in front of the steel door. He placed his palm on the cold metal one last time. "I'm ready, Dad." He raised the crowbar. The first blow rang through the RV like a struck bell. The metal door rang back. A small dent appeared where the hook of the crowbar had landed. He swung again. Harder. The lock began to bend. He swung again. And again. And again. His arms ached. His breath came short. His knuckles split where they had scraped against the steel. He did not stop. He swung until the wood of the doorframe began to splinter, until the lock mechanism inside gave a sharp metallic crack, until the door shifted on its hinges with a sound like something releasing a breath. It had been holding for 7 years. The door opened. Cold air poured out of the dark space beyond. Tucker lowered the crowbar. He stood in the doorway, breathing hard, and he looked into the room his father had built. It was small, smaller than a closet, 3 feet wide, maybe 5 feet deep. The walls were lined with shelving. The shelves held metal boxes, file cabinets, a small lockbox. There was a cot folded against one wall. There was a coffee mug on a tiny shelf with cold coffee still pooled in the bottom. There were neatly folded clothes on a hook by the door. A man had been living here, recently. The coffee was not 7 years old. The clothes had been worn. The cot still had the indent of a body. Tucker stepped inside. He turned slowly in the small space, taking it in his heart. Pounding so hard, he could feel it in his fingertips. On the largest shelf in the back sat the small lockbox. He pulled it down. He set it on the cot. He broke it open with the crowbar. Inside, lying on a folded piece of canvas, were 3 things. A ceramic plate, gray-green, the size of a paperback book, with a black serial number stamped along one edge. A small USB drive. A folded sheet of paper, white, with a single name written across the front in his father's handwriting. Tucker. He sat down on the cot. He picked up the letter. He unfolded it with hands that would not stop shaking. He began to read. Tucker. If you are reading this letter, then a great many things have gone wrong and one thing has gone right. The wrong things are easier to list. I'm not there to tell you any of what I'm about to write. Your mother has not told you the truth about me or about her, or about us. The men who took me from you are still in this world, still wearing the same suits, still drawing the same paychecks. Those are the wrong things, and I have spent years grieving them. The one thing that has gone right is you. You are old enough now. You are strong enough now. You found your way to this room, which means you found your way to the road, which means you found your way out of the house where I had to leave you. I'm sorry, son. I am sorry beyond any words I have for it. There was no path I could find that did not require me to disappear. Every other path led to your funeral, or your mother's, or both. So I chose the path that broke my heart and left yours whole, and I have spent every day since living in that choice. What you found in this room is real. The plate is real. The drive is real. The names on the drive are real. Take all of it to a reporter named Anna Reyes at the San Francisco Chronicle. Not to the police, not to the FBI, not yet. Reporters first. Once it is in the public record, the rest will follow. One more thing. I am still alive. I do not know if I will be alive when you read this. I do not know if the day will come when I can stand in front of you and ask for your forgiveness. But if there is breath left in me, I am going to find you. I love you, son. Be careful. Trust the watch. Trust Bo Hargrove. Trust no one else. Your father, Dale. Tucker held the letter in his lap and could not move. The cold air of the small steel room pressed against his skin. His chest moved up and down in slow, ragged breaths that he could not seem to control. His eyes had stopped seeing the page. The handwriting had blurred. The signature at the bottom, the 4 small letters of his father's name, hung in his vision like a candle flame. His father was alive. The 2 words refused to fit inside his head. They moved around the edges, trying to find a place to settle, and they kept being pushed back out by the simple, stubborn weight of 7 years of grief. 7 birthdays. 7 Christmases. 7 first days of school where Tucker had walked out of the house with no father at the door to watch him go. He had buried Dale Brennan 1,000 times in those 7 years in his sleep and his memories, in the quiet places where boys go when they cannot grieve out loud. He had built his entire understanding of himself around a hole in the world, and the hole had not been real. Tucker pressed the letter against his chest. He bent forward over his knees, and for the first time since the night his stepfather had pointed at the door, he wept. Not loudly, not the way he had wanted to weep at his father's funeral 7 years ago. He wept the way men weep when they have run out of room to carry what they are carrying, the kind of weeping that comes from somewhere lower than the throat, that shakes the whole body, that takes a long time to finish. When it was finished, he sat up. He wiped his face with the sleeve of his hoodie. He folded the letter carefully and put it in the inside pocket of his backpack next to the photograph. He picked up the ceramic plate and turned it over in his hands. It was lighter than he had expected. The serial number on the edge was clear and crisp. He picked up the USB drive and held it up to the dim light. It looked unremarkable, the kind of cheap drive a person might buy at any drugstore. He put both items in the backpack with the letter. He stood up. He had a job to do now. His father had told him what it was. He left the small steel room. He shut the broken door behind him as best he could, though it would not latch. He walked back through the narrow hallway into the main cabin of the RV, and he sat down on the bench seat to think. He could not drive the RV to San Francisco. He understood that now. If the men in the SUVs had been following him last night, if they had been watching his route, then the RV was a beacon. They would be looking for it on every highway between here and the coast. He had to leave it behind. He looked around the small cabin one last time. The cracked windows, the torn vinyl, the smell of dust and rust and faint cold coffee. The place where he had spent the 3 strangest nights of his life. He felt a sharp, sudden affection for the broken vehicle that had pulled him out of the rain. "Thank you," he said quietly to the RV, to his father, to whatever ghost of the man had built the door at the back. "I'll come back for you." He packed his backpack, the letter, the photograph, the compass, the folder Bo had given him, the USB, the ceramic plate wrapped in a torn piece of bedsheet to protect it. He fastened his father's watch tightly on his wrist. He took the last of his cash, $12, and folded it into the inside pocket of his jeans. He left the rest of his peanut butter and bread on the kitchenette counter for whoever might come after. He stepped out of the RV. The morning air was cold and clean. The sun had risen over the eastern edge of the valley, and the long shadows of the gas station pumps stretched across the lot in pale gold bars. Tucker stood for a moment beside the RV. He locked the door even though he did not know why. He put the keys in his pocket. He walked. He walked along the shoulder of the road back toward the center of Bakersfield. Past the warehouses and the empty lots, past the diner where his father had taken him for pancakes when he was small. He walked for 40 minutes before he reached the Greyhound station downtown. He used 11 of his 12 remaining dollars to buy a one-way ticket on the next bus to San Francisco. The bus would leave in 55 minutes. He sat on a metal bench inside the station and waited. He kept the backpack between his feet. He kept his hood up over his head. He watched the people moving through the station. A thin morning crowd, mostly older men in work clothes and a few young women with children. No one looked at him. No one seemed to notice him at all. He had become, in the space of 3 days, the kind of boy that people did not see. His phone vibrated in his pocket. He took it out. The screen showed an unknown number. He hesitated for one long second. Then he answered. "Hello." The voice on the other end was a man's voice, but not the voice of Bo Hargrove. This voice was younger, smoother, almost pleasant. Tucker. Tucker did not say anything. "My name is Sterling Vance. I believe you saw me yesterday in Sacramento from the window of a coffee shop on the corner of Lassen and 8th. I would like to have a conversation with you." Tucker's mouth went dry. His grip on the phone tightened until his knuckles went white. "How did you get this number?" "Your mother gave it to me. She is sitting in a chair in a room about 20 feet from where I'm standing right now. She is unharmed. I would like to keep it that way." The blood in Tucker's body went cold. "Where is she?" That is not the right question to ask Tucker. The right question is what I want from you in exchange for her. The answer is simple. I want the documents your father took. I want the ceramic plate. I want the storage drive. I want all of it in my hands by the end of today. In exchange, your mother walks out of this room and goes home, and the two of you can spend the rest of your lives doing whatever it is people like you do. You will not be harmed. I give you my word." Tucker tried to swallow. He could not. "I don't have anything," he said. "You do. I know you do. A friend of mine has been watching you for the last 48 hours. He watched you meet with Bo Hargrove last night. He watched you drive south. He watched you go into that RV this morning. And he watched you come out of it half an hour ago with a backpack that is heavier than the one you went in with. So do not insult me, Tucker. I do not insult you. Do me the same courtesy." Tucker stood up from the bench. He walked slowly to the side of the station, away from the other passengers. His heart was hammering. His mind was moving fast. "How do I know my mother is alive?" "Because I am telling you she is. I want to hear her voice." There was a pause on the other end, then a soft rustling sound. Then a woman's voice, his mother's voice, faint and shaking. "Tucker." "Mom." "Tucker, I am sorry. I am sorry for everything. Please, please do whatever he says." She started to say something else, and then the phone shifted, and Sterling Vance was back on the line. "There. You have heard her. Now you will listen to me. You are going to take a bus to San Francisco. You will arrive at the Salesforce Transit Center at 11:35 this morning. From there, you will take a taxi to an address. I will text you in 1 hour. You will come alone. You will bring everything you have taken from that RV. If you go to the police, your mother dies. If you go to the Chronicle, your mother dies. If you call Bo Hargrove, your mother dies. Are we understanding each other?" Tucker did not answer. "Tucker, I'm here. Are we understanding each other?" "Yes." "Good boy." The line went dead. Tucker stood against the wall of the bus station with the phone in his hand and the floor moving slowly under his feet. He had 38 minutes until his bus left. He had a backpack with evidence that could put Sterling Vance in a federal prison for the rest of his life. He had a mother sitting in a chair somewhere, with a man who had already killed 207 American soldiers in the name of a contract. He had a father alive somewhere in the world whom he had never expected to see again. He had no good choices. He stood for a long minute, breathing slowly, forcing his mind to stop racing. Then he walked across the station to a payphone, the kind of payphone that still hung in old bus stations, because no one had bothered to remove them. He fed it the last of his change. He dialed the number Bo Hargrove had called him from the day before. It rang 4 times. Then a voice answered, older, steady. "Yes." "Bo, it's Tucker." "Tucker, are you all right?" "They have my mother." Bo was silent for a moment. "Where are you?" "Bakersfield Greyhound. They want me to come to San Francisco and bring everything I have. They said if I call the police or the Chronicle or you, they kill her. Then you should not be calling me. I had to." "Bo, I don't know what to do." There was another long silence on the other end. Then Bo said something Tucker did not expect. "Listen to me, son. There is one person in this world who can help you with this. There is one person who knows Sterling Vance better than anyone alive, and who has spent 7 years preparing for this exact day. I'm going to give you a phone number. You are going to call it the moment you hang up with me. You are going to do exactly what the man on the other end tells you to do. Do you understand? Who is it? Just write down the number." Tucker took out a pen. He wrote the number on the back of his hand. 10 digits, a San Francisco area code. "Bo," he said. "Who am I calling?" Bo was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer than Tucker had ever heard it. "You are calling the man who has been waiting longer than I have for you to be old enough." He hung up. Tucker stared at the number on the back of his hand. His pulse moved in slow, heavy waves. He took a breath. He picked up the payphone again. He dialed. It rang once. The voice that answered was a voice Tucker had heard only in his memory for 7 years. It was older now, worn at the edges. The kind of voice a man has after he has spent a long time speaking only to himself. But it was unmistakable. It was the voice that had read him bedtime stories. The voice that had taught him to find the North Star. The voice that had said this was my father's and his father's before him. And now it is yours. Tucker. Tucker's knees almost went out from under him. "Dad." The word was barely a word. It came out of him like something he had been swallowing for 7 years. Tucker, listen to me. We do not have much time. I know what Sterling has done. I know he has your mother. I have been listening on a parallel line. Are you alone right now? Yes. Good. I need you to do exactly what I say. Can you do that? Yes. You're going to get on that bus to San Francisco. You are going to take it all the way to the Salesforce Transit Center. You are going to do exactly what Sterling told you to do. You are going to take the taxi he tells you to take. You are going to walk into the building he tells you to walk into. You are going to do all of it exactly the way he has planned it. Do you understand? Dad, I have all the evidence. I have the plate. I have the drive. He's going to take it from me and kill us both. He is not. Tucker, look at me. Listen to me. I have been waiting 7 years for him to make this exact move. I have been planning for this day with people I cannot tell you about over a phone line. By the time you walk into that building, every exit will be covered. Every camera will be ours. The FBI agents who will be watching you from the moment you step off that bus are people I have trusted with my life for a long time. Sterling thinks he is setting a trap for you. He is walking into one of mine. Do you understand? Dad, I am going to be there, son. When you walk into that room, I am going to be there. I have not seen you in 7 years. I am going to see you today. Do you hear me? Tucker could not speak. He pressed the phone against his ear with both hands. Tell me you hear me. I hear you. Get on the bus. I love you, son. I have loved you every single day. The line went dead. Tucker stood with the phone against his ear for a long time after the call ended. The dial tone hummed faintly. He hung up. He turned and walked back across the station to his bench. He sat down. He waited. The bus came at 9:45. He got on it. He sat in a window seat near the back, his backpack in his lap, his hood pulled up. He looked out the window at the long, flat valley unrolling outside the glass. The sun rose higher. The miles rolled away. He did not sleep, but he did not feel awake either. He was somewhere between two worlds, suspended in the space between the boy he had been 3 nights ago and the man he was about to become. He took the watch off his wrist once halfway through the drive, and he looked at the back of it. The engraving on the back of the watch case, which he had never noticed in his father's lifetime, said the same thing the compass said. North is home. He put the watch back on. He looked out the window. The bus rolled north. San Francisco came up out of the haze. In the late morning, the white shapes of its buildings stacked up against the gray water of the bay. The bus pulled into the Salesforce Transit Center at 11:35, exactly on time. Tucker stood up. He walked off the bus. He walked through the station with his backpack tied against his shoulder. He did not look around. He did not try to spot the federal agents his father had promised would be there. He simply walked the way a boy walks when he has been told to walk, and has decided to trust the man who told him. His phone vibrated. A text from a block number. 500 California Street, 47th floor. Now. He went to the curb. He flagged a taxi. He got in. He gave the driver the address. They drove through the morning crowds of the financial district, the tall buildings rising on either side, the sky narrowing into a strip of gray between them. The cab stopped in front of a tower of dark glass. Tucker paid the driver with the last of his cash. He got out. He stood on the sidewalk in front of the building and looked up. The glass went up and up. 47 floors. Somewhere up there in a room he had not yet seen, Sterling Vance was waiting for him. So was his mother. so somewhere was his father. He walked into the building. The lobby was quiet. A security desk. A bank of elevators. He gave his name to the guard at the desk. The guard checked a tablet, nodded once, and pointed him toward the far elevator. Tucker walked across the polished marble floor. He pressed the button for the 47th floor. The doors closed. The elevator began to rise. He watched the numbers climb. 10, 20, 30. He felt the pressure change in his ears. He pressed his hand flat against the wall of the elevator car to steady himself. 47. The doors opened. He stepped out into a corridor of dark wood and gray carpet. A reception desk stood empty at the far end. A pair of glass doors led into a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the bay. Through the glass, Tucker could see a long, polished table. 3 figures stood beside it. Sterling Vance, 2 men in dark suits, and sitting in a chair at the head of the table, his mother. Lynette Brennan Doyle looked smaller than she had ever looked in his memory. Her hands were folded in her lap. Her hair was pulled back from her face. Her eyes, when they found her son through the glass, were enormous and wet, and full of a grief that did not belong to this moment, but to a much older one. Tucker pushed open the glass doors. He walked into the conference room. Sterling Vance smiled. "Tucker," he said. His voice was the same voice from the phone. Smooth, almost warm. "Thank you for coming. I see you brought a bag. Please, set it on the table." Tucker walked to the table. He set the backpack down. He did not look at his mother. He did not trust himself to look at her. "Open it," Sterling said. Tucker unzipped the backpack. He took out the ceramic plate still wrapped in the torn bedsheet. He set it on the table. He took out the USB drive. He set it on the table. He took out the folder Bo Hargrove had given him. He set it on the table. Sterling looked at the items. He did not move toward them. He looked instead at Tucker. "Is that all of it?" "Yes." "You are certain?" "Yes." Sterling nodded slowly. He glanced at one of the men in suits. The man stepped forward and began to gather the items off the table. The plate, the drive, the folder. He moved with the unhurried efficiency of a man who had done this kind of work many times before. "You have done the right thing, Tucker," Sterling said. "I am sorry your father involved you in this. He should not have. He was a good engineer. He was not, as it turned out, a very good husband or father. He chose his crusade over his family. You should know that. You should know that the man whose memory you are protecting today abandoned you long before he died." Tucker said nothing. His mother was crying silently in her chair. He could see her shoulders shaking. "Now," Sterling said, "there is the small matter of what happens next. Your mother will be released, of course. I gave you my word. You and she will go home together. You will not speak of this to anyone, if you do well. There are a number of unfortunate accidents that can befall a young man and his mother in a city like Bakersfield. I trust we understand each other." "We understand each other," Tucker said. Sterling smiled again. He turned to nod at the man with the items. The elevator chimed. Sterling's head turned toward the sound. The doors of the elevator at the end of the corridor opened and a group of people stepped out. 4 of them. They walked toward the glass doors of the conference room with the unhurried, steady pace of people who had been preparing for this walk for a long time. The first was a woman in her 30s, dark hair, a press badge clipped to her jacket. The second was a man in his 40s in an FBI windbreaker, a gun on his hip. The third was Earl Whitfield, the wool cap pushed back on his head, his weathered face set hard. The fourth was Dale Brennan. He walked through the glass doors and into the conference room, and for a moment the entire world went still. He was older. Tucker had not known how much older a man can become in 7 years until he saw it standing in the doorway. His father's hair had gone gray. There was a long, thin scar across his left temple that had not been there before. His shoulders were narrower than they had been. His hands hung at his sides in a way that suggested he was bracing himself. But it was him. It was unmistakably him. The pale river water eyes, the set of the jaw, the way he held himself like a man who had spent his life keeping his back straight against weights other men could not see. Tucker did not move. His father looked at him from across the room, and Tucker watched 7 years of grief move through his father's face in a single slow second. The eyes filled. The mouth tightened. The hands clenched once at the sides and then unclenched. Sterling Vance turned to face the newcomers. His smile was gone. "Hello, Sterling," Dale Brennan said. His voice was steady. "It has been a long time." Sterling did not speak. The FBI agent stepped forward, his hand resting on the grip of his weapon. He spoke in a calm, professional voice. "Sterling Vance, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, conspiracy to defraud the United States, and 207 counts of felony murder in the second degree. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney." Sterling's eyes moved across the room. They moved across the FBI agent, across the woman with the press badge, across Earl Whitfield, and finally landed on Dale Brennan. For one long moment, the two men looked at each other across the conference table. "How long?" Sterling said quietly. 6 months. I've been working with the Bureau for 6 months. We needed you to make a move large enough to indict you on. Taking my wife was that move. Thank you for that." Sterling closed his eyes. For a moment, he did not look like a man who had built a billion-dollar company. He looked like a man who had just lost a long game and was at the end of it only tired. The agent moved forward. He cuffed Sterling's hands behind his back. The two men in suits had already lowered themselves to their knees with their hands behind their heads. Earl Whitfield and a second federal agent who had come in behind the others moved to take them into custody. The man who had been gathering the evidence from the table set it back down very carefully and stepped away. Tucker had not moved. His father turned toward him. The two of them looked at each other across the conference room. The bay glittered behind the windows. The morning sun fell across the polished table and the chair where his mother sat weeping with her hands pressed against her mouth. Dale Brennan walked toward his son. He stopped 2 feet away. He did not reach for him. He just stood there looking down into Tucker's face, and his eyes were wet and old. "I am so sorry," Dale said. The words came out broken. "I am so sorry, son." Tucker tried to speak. He could not. He took 1 step forward, then another. His father's arms went around him. Tucker pressed his face against his father's chest, and he smelled the smell he had not smelled in 7 years. The smell of motor oil and coffee, and that other sharp thing he now understood was the chemistry of ceramic plate compounds and weapons-grade adhesives, and 100 other things his father had carried home from a job he could never speak about. He breathed it in. He held on. "I thought you were dead," he said into his father's shirt. "I know. I thought you left me. I never left you. Not for 1 day. Why didn't you come back?" "Because they were watching, son. They were watching you and your mother every single day. They had men outside your school. They had men at the grocery store where your mother shopped. The moment they believed I was still alive, they would have taken you both. The only thing keeping you safe was their belief that I was gone. I had to stay gone. Then why now? Dale pulled back. He held his son by the shoulders. He looked into his face the way fathers do when they are trying to memorize a son they have missed too much. Because Bo Hargrove called me 8 months ago and said something I had been waiting 7 years to hear. He said you had turned 17. He said your stepfather was getting violent. He said it was time to bring you in or lose you for good. We started planning then. The RV was already in place. We waited until the moment was right. The moment was the night Dwight Doyle put you out in the rain. Tucker looked at him. His mind moved slowly. Earl Whitfield is a friend's son. He was a federal investigator with the Defense Criminal Investigative Service for 30 years before he retired. He has been helping me since the week I disappeared. He is the reason I am alive. He was the one watching the gas station the night you walked into it. He was the one who decided when you said your name that you were ready. And the RV. I bought the RV in 2018. I parked it at that gas station 3 months before Sterling's people came for me. I knew if it ever came to this that you would need a place to start. A place you could afford. A place that would lead you to me. The compass on your 9th birthday. The watch. The story about the North Star. All of it was for this day, Tucker. All of it was so you would know which way was home when the time came. Tucker stared up at his father. You knew. You knew when I was 9 years old that you were going to disappear. I knew it might happen. I had been finding things at work that scared me. I started preparing your mother for the possibility, though she did not want to believe me. I started preparing you in the only way I could think of. I gave you a compass and I taught you to look up at the stars, and I told you that no matter how lost you got, there was a way home. I prayed every night for 7 years that you would remember. Tucker's eyes filled. He looked over his father's shoulder at his mother, who was standing now, her face a wet ruin, her arms hanging at her sides as if she had forgotten what to do with them. He understood in that moment something about her that he had not understood before. She had known. She had not known everything, but she had known some of it. She had known her husband had been pretending to be a mechanic. She had known he had been in danger. She had known when the police came to her door in August of 2019 that the story she was being told might not be the whole story. And she had buried all of it under bourbon and silence and Dwight Doyle, because she had not known what else to do with the unbearable weight of it. She had failed him. He knew that. But she had been failing under a weight no human being should have to carry alone. He walked across the room. He stopped in front of her. She looked up at him and her face crumpled. "Tucker," she whispered, "I am so sorry." He did not say anything. He put his arms around her. He held her while she cried. He felt her body shaking against his. The body that had carried him into the world. The body that had broken under the weight of a marriage and a lie, and the loss of a man she had loved and not been able to save. "It's okay, Mom," he said. It was not okay. They both knew it. But it was the first true thing he had ever said to her, and she heard it the way she needed to hear it. And she pressed her forehead against his shoulder and wept. The FBI agents led Sterling Vance out of the room. The press reporter, a woman whose name Tucker would later learn was Anna Reyes, came forward and shook Dale's hand. Bo Hargrove arrived 10 minutes later, breathing hard from the stairs. He embraced Dale for a long time. He shook Tucker's hand and looked at him with shining eyes. It was over. The story did not end there, of course. Stories like this do not end in single rooms. But the worst of it was over. The years of fear were over. The waiting was over. In the 6 months that followed, the case against Meridian Defense Systems became one of the largest defense contracting scandals in American history. Anna Reyes won a National Journalism Award for her reporting. Sterling Vance was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 40 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. The company was dissolved. Its assets were seized. A federal restitution program was established for the families of the 247 soldiers who had ultimately been confirmed to have died wearing the defective armor. Each family received compensation and apology from the United States government and a folded letter from a man named Dale Brennan that explained in plain language what their loved ones had died for and what had been done to honor them. Tucker moved to Sacramento. He lived with his father in a small house on a quiet street with a garage in the back. They spent the first weekend cleaning out the garage. They spent the second weekend driving down to Bakersfield in a borrowed pickup truck with a flatbed trailer. They loaded the old RV onto the trailer and brought it home. His father did not fix the RV all at once. They worked on it over a long time in the evenings after Tucker came home from the school, where he had enrolled to finish his senior year. Dale Brennan, who had once been a senior engineer at one of the largest defense companies in the country, who had been declared dead and brought back to life, by his own hand knelt under the chassis of a broken Winnebago in the evenings and showed his son how to rebuild a fuel pump. His mother did not come to live with them. She tried in her own way to make peace with what had happened. She entered a treatment program in Bakersfield. She divorced Dwight Doyle in the spring. She called Tucker on Sunday afternoons, and sometimes he answered and sometimes he did not. But he stopped hating her, which was as much grace as he could offer in the first year. On a Friday evening in May of 2027, almost a year after the morning in the conference room on the 47th floor, Tucker and his father drove the RV out into the desert east of the city. The engine ran better now. It still rattled. It still leaned slightly to the left. But it moved when they asked it to move. And that was enough. They drove until the lights of the city fell away behind them, and the road became a thin gray ribbon under a deepening sky. They pulled off at a turnout in the high desert. They climbed onto the roof of the RV with 2 folding chairs and a thermos of coffee. The stars came out one by one. Dale Brennan pointed at the sky. He showed his son all over again as if for the first time. The constellations he had taught him long ago. The Big Dipper. The handle that swept around and pointed toward the bright, steady point that did not move. "There," Dale said. "That one. You see it." "Yes, Dad. That is the one. The whole sky turns around it. You find that star, and you always know which way is home." Tucker looked up at the North Star. The brass watch ticked softly on his wrist. The compass was in his pocket. The man who had given him both was sitting next to him in a folding chair on the roof of a broken RV that had once cost $10 and had turned out to be worth more than anything he would ever own. He thought about the boy he had been 3 nights ago, walking out of his stepfather's house in the rain with nowhere to go and nothing in his pocket but a folded photograph and the small last hope that the world might one day stop pushing him away. He thought about the door at the back of the RV, the cold steel, the 2 letters etched in the corner. He thought about Earl Whitfield's voice in the rain asking him a question, whose answer had set this entire life in motion. "What is your name, son?" He thought about the letter his father had left for him, the words that had broken him open in a small steel room 300 miles away. "I am still alive." He looked across at his father in the dark. "I spent my last $10 on a broken RV," Tucker said quietly. "I thought I was buying a place to sleep." Dale Brennan smiled. The smile was older now than it had been in any photograph, but it was the same smile. "What did you actually buy?" Tucker looked back up at the North Star. The brass of the watch glowed faintly in the starlight. Somewhere far below them, the long, flat valley of California stretched on into the night. full of houses where boys were sleeping and fathers were sitting up late, and mothers were trying to find their way back to themselves. "I bought you back," Tucker said. "I bought my whole life back." His father did not answer. He did not need to. He reached across the small space between their two chairs and put his hand on his son's shoulder, and the two of them sat together in the dark for a long time, watching the stars.